guys, Keith here. Another time for an update video. This time we're covering xLights version 2018.31 through to 35. This video is going to be a little different than my usual update videos, mainly because there's not a huge number of enhancements here. We've actually been focused very heavily on closing out a whole bunch of defects, etc., which means you're not seeing as much new functionality coming out in the last few releases. But also where there is new functionality, it tends to be not very visual or a little bit technical, and I'll have to explain it. So a little bit more talking, a little bit less driving xLights. As usual, let's start with the oldest first. And the first one here is about replacing model prompts to copy replace model start channel if it doesn't look like you set the start channel on the replacement model. So what the hell does that mean? So basically here, for instance, here I've got this little dot here is my green tree. It's a single channel tree. And let's imagine that I wanted to replace it with an xLights tree. And so what I could do is I could come up here, I could create a tree. We'll set the number of strings to 1. We'll set the spiral wraps to 3. There it is. It's a nice spiral tree. We will set the string properties to a single channel, a single color. There we are. And this tree happens to be green, so let's make it green. All good. So that's great. We'll give it a name. This is my green. And we'll make sure that name's unique. Now let's imagine I want to replace this dot here with this thing here. And the way you would do that is you would come up and click on the model you intend to replace it with. And there's this replace a model with this model. Right, so remember this model here's my green tree, and I'm looking here to replace my green tree without the underscore. So the way I would do that is I'd come up here and say replace it. I'd go down and find my green tree. There it is there. And I would click OK. Now remember that was on start channel. That tree there was on output 4, start channel 4. I'll click OK, and so it's come up and it said, oh, okay, should I copy the replace model start channel to the replacement model? And if I say yes, so first of all, you see the tree's gone, the old tree's now gone, and this one remains, and its start channel happens to be the same as what that tree was. So that lets me swap it in. And the beauty of this is if you go down and look at one of my groups, like my, I think I have a green dumb group which would have had that tree in it. Notice how the green tree is still in it. Now this now is called green tree. So everything has, I've managed to swap a model out, replace it, and I haven't managed to break a group. And that's why the replace model's there, and copying the start channel saves you that extra step of remembering what the start channel is and replacing it with it. So that's what that means, like a little bit complicated, but just something to make it easier. Rewrite the Falcon and the ES Pixel Stick uploads to reduce edge cases. So this one's kind of hard to show you, but I can explain it. So we've supported upload to the Falcons for a while now, and there were limitations, right? There were certain rules you had to follow. So you could have something like all of these snowflakes on a single output on your Falcon, and that was fine. And as long as you set all of their controller connections to be the same, then when you did the upload, that would work fine. You could also put an individual model on a separate output, which is what these are. So that's on output 26, that one's on 25, and so forth, and that would upload okay as well. But what if you had a tree like this one here? This one here happens to be 4 outputs. And what happens if you wanted to put the star at the top here at the end of the last string on that tree? Under the old world, you couldn't do that. Now you could. So let's imagine this was using outputs, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, and 7. If you put this on output 7 as well, then xLights would be smart enough when it did the upload to the Falcon controller to know that it just should extend the number of pixels on output 7 to include not only a quarter of the tree, but also the star as well. So nothing I can show you in terms of outputs here, but that's what happens behind the scenes. So we'll go on from there. Okay, so this change here, add submodel draw dialog, and this one up here to add the node select. There's a whole series of these changes that Scott's been doing, and you can see it in the submodels dialog. If you go into the submodels dialog here, and if you add a new submodel like so, you can come down here and you can click on draw model. And what draw model will do is it will bring up the grid where you can see the snowflake, and this allows you to do things like select a set of pixels and make them part of the submodel. So if I click OK now, it builds a submodel which contains those pixels that I'd highlighted. If we delete all those rows, I can go back and do it again. You can also come in here and you can double click on the nodes you want to include in your submodel as well. If you want to deselect everything, you can say select none. You can select all and then deselect the ones you don't want. That all works fine, and that creates your submodels. If you're working with something like a matrix and you go into the submodel dialog here, you add a new submodel and you go into here. You can also go into this freehand mode, and with the freehand mode you can click and drag and create submodels like so. Okay, so now if I go in and create a new sequence, okay, there's my sequence. I go down to my matrix model, which is there, double click, there's my submodel, and if I throw a butterfly on it, you can see I've created a submodel just by freehand drawing on my matrix. Now I could have been a lot more careful. I could have drawn candy canes or stars or whatever else, and then just sequence those things like they're a submodel, which is kind of cool. I used to have to use a spreadsheet to do that sort of stuff. So it's a really, really neat enhancement. Thanks, Scott. Consolidating render cache folders. This is a change where I've now, previously I was creating all the render cache folders directly in your show folder, but now I create this render cache folder and I put all the render cache folders under here. If you still have render cache folders in your show folder, you can just go and delete them. The next time you render, it will go and create the render cache folder and put them all into there. So hopefully that'll keep your folders a little bit neater. Import export on the color manager dialog. I'm sure most people don't even know the color manager dialog exists, but there is this dialog here that Gil added some time ago, which lets you go and basically, this is, you can see that I've selected this here. That's the reference effect. If I want to change that to be blue, I can come into here, click on that, and make that blue, and it will, in future when I click on them, it will be blue. So if you're, I don't know, low in vision and maybe you need greater contrast, etc., you can play with the colors here and make them suit you. And the change that Scott's introduced is he now allows you to export and import these colors. I don't know, in case you want to share them or move them over to another machine or something, it's now possible. Okay, so that takes us up to, so 33 was all fixes. 34, allow blink for rest and off static phonemes. What does that mean? Well, if I go to one of my faces, do I have a face? Sure, I have a face. Oh, it's in groups. Hang on. Tell how little I sequence. I don't even know the order that my things are in. Okay, so here's my faces down here. So I throw a face on there. Okay, there it is rendered. You can see the eyes are always open. If I change this phoneme to be rest, you can see that it will now blink. Previously, it wouldn't blink. It would just sit there with the eyes open. Same if you turn the mouth off, it will blink periodically, randomly. And that previously wasn't the case. So if that's what you want, if you just want eyes blinking randomly, that'll give you eyes just blinking randomly. I guess that might be useful for Halloween. I think that's where Bill wanted to use it. 7 pixel fonts on the text effect. Where are we? Where are we? Text effect. So this is, to be honest, mainly for icicles. So a lot of the icicles are 7 pixels high, and thanks to Ryan, who's in Adelaide, one of the ACL guys, he knocked up a 7 high font so that you can take full advantage of your 7 pixel high icicles to put text on them now. Previously, your only options were 6 or 8, so you have a couple of extras there now. MIDI timecode support, what does that mean? Okay, I'm not running it. So if you fire up xSchedule, there is now a MIDI timecode master and a MIDI timecode slave. You do need to come down here and choose your MIDI device and choose the rate at which you want it to send out MIDI timecode. And this will now integrate with programs out there that support MIDI timecode, so you can synchronize xSchedule with those either as a master driving them or not. The way in which this works, if you're going to be using, and this is not just true of MIDI timecode, it's also true of OSC timecode. Basically, you would be setting xSchedule up with the first schedule being the main schedule, and the timecode is sent relative to the beginning of that particular playlist when it's playing. So it just sends a time that increments across all the songs. That's the only way you can support it, because those timecode formats are really just a zero base. They start at 0 and they count on up. So you can't have elaborate sets of playlists and different songs like you can with things like the FPP sync and the like. It's just the way it is. Limitations of those protocols. Start and end time to the lyric dialogue. This is, so if you're in here and you want to add some lyrics, you can come in here and cut and paste a bunch of lyrics in, and now what you can do is you can say at what time those lyrics start and stop in the song. Why is that important? Well, the way this works, for those that haven't seen it before, let's copy that so I have to type it in again. Normally this is what would happen. It would take each one of those lines and split them out equally across the duration of the song. But a lot of songs have large instrumentals at the beginning or large instrumentals at the end. And now you've got to go and adjust this a lot. So the beauty of this is, oops, that's not what I wanted. Import lyrics. The beauty of this is you can now come in and say, well, actually, the lyrics start at 10 seconds, that they finish at 25 seconds. And now it will make sure that the lyrics are only spread across that, and you don't have to do as much adjustment and moving around of the lyrics when you go to break it all down and everything. So that's kind of useful for those situations. Dan updated the standard dictionary. That's kind of important. So things, there was a defect around the word let's. That now, if you give this a second, it always takes a while to load the first time because it's pretty big, and we load it all into memory. So it used to be when you tried to break down the word let's into phonemes, it wouldn't break down properly, and now it does. You can see it has broken down correctly, and that's because the newer dictionary has more words, including some of those things in it. I can't demonstrate this one obviously, but previously on OS X, if you were to unplug your headphones while you're in the middle of doing a playback or something, xLights would not switch over to your speakers, and so consequently the only way to get audio working again was to shut xLights down and restart it. So Dan's added some handlers in to detect the fact that you've unplugged your headphones and switch over, and you should be on the fly. It should be okay. You might get a small pause, but it should work fine. 35, a couple of new APIs. For some time now, there's been buttons in here for running event playlists. Well, now there's a new one called stopping an event playlist. So there's a video that was recently done at the Adelaide Mini around controlling xLights using a MIDI device, and he was trying to build a piano with piano controls. He was running playlists, and on the key up he really wanted to be able to stop it. So now there is a stop event playlist, and that will work. That will enable you to actually build a MIDI piano that potentially plays either different sequences or different lights, etc., based on keyboard events, and that should work pretty well. So yeah, a couple of extra APIs there, as usual, documented in the usual text document. Gil's made a few changes around this one. So the law optimized output previously wasn't working properly in the test dialog. At most, the first 16 channels were working. He's now fixed that, so you should be able to use the test dialog if you happen to be using the law optimized output. The other thing about the law optimized output, and we've said this 100 times, but it doesn't always get heard. The law protocol, it's designed to be very efficient for certain types of output. So if you're sending large number of channels with similar values, etc., the law protocol is extremely optimized to handle those sort of situations, and that made a lot of sense when we were running AC lights and you had slow serial protocols. Having a protocol that's very efficient for handling those situations made a lot of sense. The problem the law protocol has is that as you change more and more channels, so like when you put a butterfly on, it actually becomes harder and harder. In fact, the protocol becomes very inefficient. So, you might only send 35 bytes to update 3,000 channels when you're running the bars effect. But when you're running the butterfly effect, you're sending actually 13 or 14,000 channels worth of data to update 3,000 channels worth of output. So in certain situations, the law protocol actually becomes horrifically inefficient, and in fact can overwhelm the output. And so what Gil's done here is he said that, look, when we're writing out to these law device, if we get into one of these situations where it's sending an horrific amount of data, then I'm basically just going to drop frames until the law protocol catches up. Because if you don't do that, what ends up happening is you create this big backlog in data to send, and so you get this really laggy display. And so the call Gil's made, and I think it's the right call, is if you get into one of these backlog situations, don't just keep making it worse by throwing out more data. Start dropping frames until it catches up, and then start to send the data again. So that's what's going to happen. You'll only notice this if you're running a Pixie, at least a Pixie 8, maybe a Pixie 16, and you're smashing out butterfly type effects, and it just gets really inefficient. The other one, this one here, is around arches and icicles. It used to be that if you drew an arch backwards from right to left, it actually used to draw it upside down. Now Gil's got it so it's drawing front to back, which is exactly how it's going to work in 3D as well. The problem is if you had previously drawn an arch and it was upside down, you may have come down to this size location Sorry, you might have grabbed this here, the same thing, but yeah, you may have grabbed this thing here and rotated it around. The problem is when you now loaded 35, you would have found that the arch would have flipped upside down. And the easiest way to fix that is to come down. Sorry. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not even sure what you'd zero out. So yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's why that happens. I could have sworn there was a way for you to visualize that, but obviously there isn't. Anyway, but yeah, you just have to flip it around. I realize that's inconvenient, but you only have to do it the once in the layout and everything should be fine. If you need to, you might need to swap the green square, blue square as well to get it to behave exactly the way you've got it wired. But that's, as far as we're concerned, that's a fix, and therefore you need to correct your layout by making the appropriate changes here. Don't expect that we're going to reverse that change in the future. That's not going to happen. You'll need to go in there and make a slight tweak to your layout to deal with that situation. Add a timing track from row header. Provides all the timing options. What does Gil mean by that? What he means is if you come into here and add the timing track, you can now see all of the timing options. Because I don't have a music track, you can't see that. So let me quickly go and create a music track. Audio, do that. So if I come up here and I go add timing track, all of the Audacity types of timing tracks are now available here. That never used to be the case. You used to have to go up to settings, sequence settings, timings, and add it there in order to get those. So yeah, Gil's fixed that up, so that's easier to get to. And that's it. That's all the changes. Like I said, not a huge number of enhancements over the last few releases, but a huge number of bug fixes. Trying to get it all sort of super stable for your Christmas shows. So thanks a lot, guys.